We who live in the Salt Lake Valley are very fortunate to have two great interstate highways coming in and crossing into our valley. But we take these highways for granted. We don't think much about them unless we're tied up in heavy traffic or some kind of a traffic accident and can't get where we want to go as quickly as we want to get there. We take them for granted. We know little about how the interstate system came to be. Today, I am going to show you how our interstate system became what it is today. And this story starts over 100 years ago, and it starts out with a real disappointment. There was a young lieutenant colonel in the Army who wanted desperately to get into the battle in Europe, but was told, no, we need you here in America. He lost his opportunity to fight in the war. Well, life has a way of coming around full circle, and this young lieutenant colonel was given an opportunity after the war was over. They said, have we got a job for you? The Army wanted to do a grand PR excursion of a convoy going from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, and they selected this lieutenant colonel to be the commander of this massive convoy. The map in front of you is the route that they traveled. It was the old Lincoln Highway and the best highway in America at the time. And the convoy started just after the war in 1919. It started its journey in Washington, D.C. on July 7th. It traveled a stunning 6 miles per hour on average. There were almost 300 soldiers and over 80 vehicles. And the trek took 62 days. Now you might ask, well, why so long? And that's a good question. Along the way, they would stop and make public addresses and ceremonies, and oftentimes they'd go through a town or a city and have a grand parade like this one in Salt Lake City. Another thing that slowed them down was the roads. The roads in those days were made of dirt, not concrete, not asphalt, but dirt. And when it rained, mud. As you can see from this slide of Donner Pass on the Lincoln Highway going through California. Another problem they had was the bridges. Many of the bridges weren't wide enough or strong enough to hold the trucks that were in the convoy. Many historians have said that the convoy was a 3,000-mile obstacle course. Well, the years rolled on, and during World War II, this lieutenant colonel was able to get into the European campaign, and he became very aware of something that Germany had, and that was the Autobahn system. Magnificent roads that were well laid out, wide, and had limited access going on and off the Autobahn. And our Army knew how to use the Autobahn. We used it to move tanks and trucks and troops, provisions, implements of war, and everything we needed once we got into Germany to defeat the Germans using their own roads. We also used their Autobahn as airstrips. And it's time that I told you who this young lieutenant colonel was. This young lieutenant colonel was now General Eisenhower, the supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe during World War II. After the war, Eisenhower had a strong vision of what we needed here in America. We needed roads that were built well, that could transport goods, services, and we just needed a top-rate highway system here in America. In 1952, the Republicans nominated Dwight Eisenhower to be President of the United States. In 1953, he was inaugurated and soon thereafter began building and selling his vision of a grand highway system here in America. He only had one major problem, and that was a Democrat Congress. In order to get this legislation passed and the roads starting to be built, he had to gain broad bipartisan support. He couldn't do it with just the Republicans. And so he began to court and to woo and to impress and charm many of the Democrats in Congress to get this legislation passed. And then in 1956, Dwight Eisenhower was able to sign the bill that started our interstate highway system. It allowed for 41,000 miles of road, and the legislation appropriated $25 billion to be spent over the next 13 years to start his dream of an interstate highway system. I remember what things were like before Ike with our highways here in America. This is a photo of the windy, narrow road going up through Parley's Canyon by Mountain Dell Reservoir. It had a big double line all the way along the road. You couldn't pass anybody, and it was slow going. Today, we have I-80 going up Parley's Canyon with 3 lanes up and 3 lanes down, and it's magnificent in every respect. Could you imagine trucks like this going on that narrow road going down Parley's Canyon that was used over 50 years ago? And our families have also benefited. I remember before we had the interstate that it would take 45 minutes to an hour to go from the suburbs here in Salt Lake Valley into the city. And of course, the same time to come back home. Today, we can do that in half the time, 20 or 30 minutes. A family now can travel cross-country easily in 4 or 5 days. The construction was a big benefit. 30 years after the original legislation was passed, the company I worked for got the concrete contract to build the Interstate I-15 from Midvale all the way up to Parley's Canyon. I worked a lot of overtime and my family saw a lot of benefit from those dollars generated with the construction of the interstate system. It's a marvelous system. It's not only faster, but also safer. Estimates vary from 60 to 70% safer than the other roads in America 4-mile traveled. This is a photo of the Spaghetti Bowl in Salt Lake City, where I-15 and I-80 converge, and you can go into those intertwining intersections and ramps and go any direction from the direction that you came into it from, or keep going in the same direction. It's a marvelous, marvelous system. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the character of President Eisenhower. He was in charge of D-Day along with his staff, and the pressure was enormous. He was smoking 4 or 5 packs of unfiltered Camels every day and drinking gallons of coffee and only getting about 4 hours sleep on a regular basis. He and his staff were working very, very hard. Of course, we know the outcome of D-Day, and one thing that is amazing about General Eisenhower is he sent out credit to all of the combatants after D-Day to congratulate them on such a success. He told them, "Your accomplishments of the first 7 days of this campaign have exceeded my brightest hopes. You are truly a great allied team. I truly congratulate you upon a brilliantly successful beginning to this great undertaking. Liberty-loving people everywhere would today like to join me in saying to you, I am proud of you." But what if the campaign had failed? This preyed heavily on General Eisenhower's mind continually, day and night. And after the campaign was over, a note was found that he had penned in case of retreat. And this is how it went. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. Many leaders today step right up to take the credit and shy away and find a fall person to blame when things go wrong. President Eisenhower was truly a man of great character. But the story doesn't end there. In 1990, George Bush signed legislation that changed the name of our interstate system here in America to the Dwight D. Eisenhower System of Interstate and Defense Highways. Of course, President Eisenhower had died 20 years prior to this renaming of the interstate system. It's my belief that had he still been alive, that he would have objected to the notoriety and having his name attached to the highway system that he so ardently proposed and challenged for us here in America today.